Hello and welcome to another chat with Sarah. Today I'm talking about symptoms being messengers and pain being protective. So as a body worker of 25 years, I've seen a lot of bodies and worked, obviously on a lot of bodies. And primarily most people perceive and come to me with physical symptoms. But there is a layer below that of emotions that can play into how your symptoms express. And depending on where you are on the spectrum, some of you may have read books by Louise Hay, such as You Can Heal Your Body, Ina Segal and her, secret language of the body, Yvette Rose and her metaphysical anatomy and all of those kind of things. And so there is evidence there through those people that our symptoms have deeper messages, and that if you choose to, you can go into the emotional side of your body. And typically I will bring that up in a consultation if someone's not responding to the standard touch therapy in a way that you would expect. So potentially a symptom's hanging around, it's not resolving. Sometimes I will send people off for imaging just to make sure that that's, we're all clear on that. And again, this is also where pain comes in as a protective mechanism. So pain basically, its message is that it doesn't want to cause you more harm. But we also come up with stories around that, it's hanging around too long, it's not resolving fast enough, that, essentially most people don't want it, right? We can all agree on that. Pain isn't pleasant. I'm not saying it's pleasant, but it does have a message for us. And I talk to my clients around, particularly if they're in an acute flare-up or anything like that. Like, it's a slightly different message depending on if acute or chronic, but the essence underneath all of it is protective by nature. So and then my question to you is, what if you shifted the dynamic from hating pain? As I said, nobody likes it. I'm not, from that standpoint, I'm not saying fall in love with your pain or anything like that. But what if you actually started to ask the question of what your pain's protecting you from? So typically we think it's protecting us from further injury, further harm, all of those kind of things. But as we know, there's layers underneath that. And then I'll just tap into a couple of simple things. Let's say your pain is on the right side of your body, primarily showing up on the right side of your body. In a metaphysical standpoint, we would say that that is of a masculine essence, that it could be related to a male in your life. It could be so father, brother, husband, workmate, anything like that, boss, anything like that. And commonly I will ask the question of when did it show up, how long's it been around, what was happening at that time. Also gives us an idea, potentially, if it's right-sided. If it's got a masculine essence to it, the right side is always commonly known as more the doing side, as I said, more physical side. And then our left side is the feminine essence. And so then it can typically be related to mother figures, sisters, females in your life, all of those kind of things. So sometimes those kind of messengers come through for people and they go, oh, that showed up when I was having an argument with my mother, or that, my headaches got really bad around that time, or, or when my father passed away, I started to get right arm pain, or I started to get headaches on my right side, all of those kind of things. So there can be subtle messages in the side that it's showing up on. And so it's just a reminder that there can be layers to our pain experience. And the other bit that I want to bring into this as well, from a more science perspective, even though I've done a previous episode on why science can't have all the answers, is that we, in the more traditional bodywork side of things, work within a biopsychosocial model of pain. And the core message behind that one is that pain is multifaceted. And this one typically comes more into play with chronic pain. It can be relevant to acute pain, but more common to chronic pain. And the easiest way, again, that shows is that it's got multi-layers. So bio being body, biochemical, biomechanical, physiological, all of that kind of stuff comes under that bio headline. The psycho is a mental aspect, so it's quite common knowledge that people with chronic pain can experience depression along the same timeline, all of that kind of stuff. So hence the other part of psycho is the fear around hurting ourselves again, creating harm, all of those kind of, flips into the physical side of aspect of it. But it can create a vicious cycle, like we prevent movement because it hurts, and then we don't treat and test and try again because we're so worried it's going to hurt. So that's the psychological side of things. And as I said, there is a cluster of people, and a lot of people who have long-term strong chronic pain will often have a comorbidity of depression. And I don't like calling them comorbidities, but that's how it gets expressed. And then the social one is that we tend to, when you have a chronic pain experience, is reduce our social interactions, because socializing can take a lot of effort for people with chronic pain. And so they'll often say no to invitations, and there will be a couple of reasons behind that. So let's say you've invited them to a cafe. They've never been there before, so there can be a couple of fears involved in that. So we can go back to the psycho component of it. Is, are the seats hard? Are they soft? Am I going to, is it going to be comfortable? Am I going to be comfortable? Am I going to walk away sorer than when I arrived? A whole cluster of conversations go through people's minds when they get invited to a social situation, from that kind of point. Am I going to enjoy it? Am I, all sorts of things. And often that is why you will get no as a response to someone who has chronic pain to a social invitation. It has nothing to do with you personally. It is them not feeling like they can survive the experience and enjoy it and be present and all of those kind of things, because most likely their pain will be distracting, and so hence that biopsychosocial shows that it's multifaceted, multi-layered, and as I said, can be very different from an early chronic pain experience to a long-term chronic pain experience to an acute experience to a chronic experience, and all of those kind of things. The stories we start telling ourselves throughout that process, from that chronic pain story or an acute flare-up through a chronic pain experience. So as I say to my clients, we expect you to actually go through waves. The likelihood is that you will never transit like this. There will be there'll be flare-ups and all of that. The idea is that we want you on minor waves that come, your body deals with it, and it goes back down, starts again, all of that kind of stuff. And ideally we do want longer periods between the waves. We don't want them daily, frequent, bi-weekly frequency or any of those kind of things. I'm thinking of headaches at this point in time. Ideally we want you to be able to go for a longer span without a headache. And so it is, and hence, as I said, when we get caught up in our pain story of it hurts, I can't move, I can't do this, I can't do that, can you see how that might affect how you actually interact with your body and tend to avoid it, disassociate from it, tune it out? And they can be methods that we use to get through it. And I'm not saying that there aren't probably going to be times that you do that, but if you're constantly disassociated from your body because of the pain it's expressing, then this might be a pivotal time to come in and ask the question, what does my pain have to tell me? What does my symptom have to tell me? And So if you've read any of those books that I mentioned earlier, they'll go through a plethora of symptomology to tell you what might be showing up. And, you know, as I said, right side of the body might show up a different story to the left side of the body. Like upper back will tell a different story to a lower back story. Knee pain will tell a different story to foot pain, to hip pain, to, as I said, neck pain, all of those kind of ears, eyes, you know, all of that kind of stuff. If you're a long-term sinus sufferer, there'll be likely to be a symptom in there that potentially has an emotional attachment to it. And again, from the biopsychosocial model, the potential of that, as I said, psychological story undertone that all goes through that is very possible. I never perceive my clients' pain experience to be purely physical most of the time. Obviously, some people, an acute flare-up occurs, a headache happens, they come in, they get treatment, and it goes. It's probably got no deeper story than a bit of tension and stress. But if someone's consistently coming back in with that, and it is interesting, those people who consistently come back for the same thing eventually get to the point of, I'm sick of this showing up. And that might be when I will have that conversation with them. Have you considered that it might be deeper than your physical expression of your symptom? And some people show interest in that and other people don't. That is completely fine. It depends on where they are in their journey and all of that kind of stuff. And then some people don't even realize that they're emotionally dumping on me to feel better at the other end. So I also have to be very mindful of what, you know, releasing any of that kind of stuff that's dumped on me. And I have a client in mind around this that headaches for an extended period of time, came at a very stressful point in life. Predominantly, interestingly enough, a lot of our sessions was a conversation about what was going on, when it was going on, how it was going on, and all of that kind of stuff. And we obviously hit on its true essence, because she came back to me, you know, a fortnight later after our previous treatment, fundamentally hadn't done anything differently body-wise, but we'd had a pretty deep conversation. And she comes back and goes, I don't know what you did. I haven't had a headache since. But I know it was the emotional release that let her let go of the headache. And because, as I said, body-wise, I didn't do anything different. She hadn't been doing anything different. You know, all of that kind of stuff led pretty evidence-based to say that it was the emotional release that she had that actually allowed the headaches to leave. And as I said, not necessarily someone who was open to the idea that that was what was causing it. But I could see a tie between the conversation we had and her feeling better. And, you know, and that's fantastic. That's the whole point of it, right? Is to get to the story and get to the message and get to the deeper conversations around why our pain might be showing up and what we can do to help release it. And as I said, it's not a conversation I have with all my clients. And clearly some are more open to it than others. I've had conversations about liver causing heat, anger, is there any presence, if you're waking up hot at night, all of those kind of things. Is there a possibility that that could be a contributor, you know, and not just drinking alcohol at night and, you know, those kind of small nuances to why your symptoms might be showing up. And as I said, pain is a protective mechanism. They're all messengers. It's how deep you want to dive into that conversation. And I'd like to think that people on my channel want to do a bit of a deeper dive on that. But as I said, this is just an introductory conversation around the consideration that if your experience is chronic, long-term, isn't shifting with treatment, you've had the imaging done and it's all come back as fine, nothing fundamentally is wrong with you, that might be the time that you start to look at the emotional impact that may be contributing. And I'm a big believer in the mind-body connection, that it's a bi-directional conversation. Your body sends messages to the brain sends messages back to the body, vice versa. Some in the pain science will say it's just a body-brain thing, and it's not bi-directional and or brain-body thing, that we're getting it all wrong, and and hence why some people can walk away from some body treatments such as physiotherapy or any of that, feeling like they're getting told it's all in their head. And I'm not saying that you're definitely experiencing a body symptom. I'm not saying you're not experiencing a body symptom. I'm not saying that at all, but that symptom in the body potentially has a deeper message for you rather than just lower back pain. Or headaches or migraines or X, Y, or Z. So I wanted to open up that conversation, and it's part of the work that I do, as I said, with my clients, both through holistic counselling and the body work, because this is one area where I don't actually have to touch you to impact you. And again, you have to be open for the conversation. There's no point. And again, me reading that is very important. So, as I said, I'm assuming most people who are coming to this channel are semi-interested into the metaphysical side of health and holistic health and all of that kind of stuff. So let me know in the comments if you're interested in any deeper dives around potentially the meanings behind lower back pain, headaches, right shoulder pain, left shoulder pain, knee pain, all of that kind of stuff. I'm more than happy to dive deeper into this conversation. As I said, I've just opened potentially a can of worms here, but I think it's a great place to start, to potentially the conversation around your symptoms being a messenger, as opposed to just being annoying, and your pain as protection, as opposed to just making life unbearable. So I'm going to leave it there. As I said, let me know in the comments if there's anything you want me to dive deeper into, and I hope you enjoyed today's chat.